Madam President, I rise today because I believe that some here in Washington are under the illusion about what would happen if we were to withdraw from the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. Some people still inexplicably think that this would be a good thing. They believe that the relationship between the United States and Mexico and Canada is somehow a raw deal for Americans. Let's talk about Mexico for a while. In reality, Mexico spends 26% of their GDP purchasing goods from the United States, while we spend less than 1% of our GDP, I think it's 0.2%, purchasing goods from them. Again, for those who obsess over trade deficits with Mexico, Mexico spends 26% of its GDP purchasing goods from the United States, while we spend less than 1% of our GDP purchasing goods from them. Prior to NAFTA, our total trade with Mexico was around or under $80 billion. Now that trade approaches $600 billion. That's a good thing. That is good for us. It's good for Mexico. Trade is not a zero-sum game. There's a threat, these folks also seem to think that terminating NAFTA will have no lasting impact on this nation or its economy. In reality, pulling out of NAFTA would have sweeping negative consequences for Americans all over the country. Let me briefly describe what America would look like without NAFTA. It would be an America with fewer jobs and higher unemployment. Some of these jobs that are lost will not return for decades, maybe even a generation. Other jobs would never return. It would be a poorer America without NAFTA. Gross domestic product will drop. Much of the positive growth we've seen recently may be erased. In the last year, we've seen impressive GDP numbers. We've achieved great growth through strong conservative policies, having a better regulatory environment in particular. I hope that the days of 1% growth are behind us, but if we scrap NAFTA, that may not be the case. An America without NAFTA is one crippled by subsidies. I agree with my colleague from Kansas and the Senate Agriculture Committee, Senator Roberts. He recently explained that withdrawal from NAFTA would add to farmers' demands for increased farm subsidies at a time when Congress simply can't afford that. These farmers would prefer to sell their crops at reasonable prices, but exiting NAFTA will certainly add economic protection, or they will ask for economic protection through increased farm subsidies. I believe that many of these subsidies are automatically added. And these subsidies would substantially grow the national debt and dramatically curtail any ability to rein in government spending. Now, without NAFTA, we'll likely find ourselves in a less secure America as well. Withdrawal from NAFTA will destabilize the Mexican economy, creating a crisis on our southern border. Terminating this agreement will seriously undercut the important progress that has been made over the past several decades, improving drug enforcement, stabilizing the Mexican economy, efforts at privatization, criminal justice reform, modernization have been good for the Mexican economy and in turn has been good for our economy as well. According to the Department of Homeland Security, the number of people trying to cross illegally into the United States from Mexico has fallen to the lowest level in 46 years. That is largely due to a better economy in Mexico. If we pull out of NAFTA and allow Mexico to plunge into chaos, into economic chaos and uncertainty, it will certainly drive up the number of those who want to come to the United States. These are the real ramifications to terminating NAFTA. An America of higher unemployment, lower GDP, more federal subsidies, particularly for agriculture, and increased illegal immigration. All of this comes before we would face the ultimate challenge, if we exit NAFTA, of negotiating a new trade agreement to replace NAFTA. Anyone who suggests that this process would be quick or easy is sadly mistaken. In today's global economy, people and nations have more choices than ever. For evidence of this, look no further than the disastrous decision to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Canada and Mexico, like other TPP nations, could decide to move ahead without the United States. These countries have more choices than ever. It used to be that we were the only game in town. That is not the case anymore. These countries have and will move on without us. They could simply refocus their efforts on alternative markets and explore new trade partners. It's a dangerous game when we in America are no longer seen as a reliable trade partner. We'll have countries that are reluctant to enter into agreements with us and simply not to want to renegotiate. Now, Madam President, let's not be swayed by those who would have us believe that the impact of exiting this trade agreement would somehow be minor or short-lived. There are some who say we have to exit the agreement in order to negotiate a better agreement. As I've explained, just exiting the agreement will have real ramifications. Canceled contracts, particularly for those in agriculture when you're dealing with commodities. Let's not be misled by those who are under the illusion that negotiating an entirely new trade agreement, as I have said, would be simple or painless. It will not be. In closing, Madam President, we have seen the limits to the philosophy of ethno-nationalism and economic nationalism. We've seen those limits politically, gratefully, this week in Alabama. Let's not follow those who believe in that philosophy and are advocating an ethnocentric or an extreme nationalistic trade policy. That would be disastrous for the economy of the United States moving forward. I yield back my time.